Hello everybody, welcome to Snyder's Inc. I know this is a new green screen thing I got behind me. As you can see, press the play button right now. Anyways, got a new green screen. It doesn't look the greatest, but I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm just kind of doing a little test video with the videos, reaction videos I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be trying to do different layouts of it, trying to figure the thing out. So for the weekend videos, you'll probably have to deal with it the way it is, and then for the week, I'll probably kind of try to figure a new way out. We'll have to see. But thank you for watching. Hope you understand. I know it might look different. I got a light shining on me currently. Helps the green screen out, so you know it goes. We got another Mr. Ballen reaction video for you. This one is Old Man Makes a Shocking Confession, Halloween Scare-a-thon, Part 8. So we'll get right into this. Hit the like button, hit subscribe button, comment what you think down below, and we'll get right into this. Let's go.
In 2019, a 70-year-old man posted a lengthy confession to Reddit that quickly went viral. And if you make it to the end of today's video, you'll see why. But before we get into
There we go, that's the end. Gotta see what it is. Gotta see what it is.
today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week.
Also, please understand, if you're watching this right now, that I do not know how this looks. Actually, I might just keep it. Okay, I'm just gonna have to keep it small screen because it's the only way the whole thing gets seen. Because I guarantee you this will go full screen, you probably can barely see anything by the way this thing goes. So I'm just gonna keep it small screen for now. You'll understand why.
So if that's of interest to you, please deliver a strange, dark, or mysterious story to the like button, but in PDF format. Also, please subscribe to this channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story. On the advice of his longtime therapist, a 70-year-old man named Art began writing about what happened to him and his family 30 years earlier in 1989. His therapist
Damn, what happened to him 30 years ago in 1989? That involved him so much he needed to have his therapy for that many years.
only knew Art had lost a child and felt very guilty about it. But the conditions under which the child was lost was always very gray, even though Art had been his patient for years and the therapist had repeatedly tried to get more information. You know, was this a child that was lost in pregnancy? Was it a child that was born and died or ran away? Those details never emerged, and every time the therapist tried to dig in, Art would back off, close up, and he would not talk about it. And so finally his therapist
Why is it? What happened? What was so bad that he won't respond and he won't give anything away? What happened to this child?
said, Art, you just need to find a way to talk about this stuff. If you're not going to talk about it with me, then perhaps you should write it all down in a private journal. It'll be a very cathartic experience, and it might help you get over that guilt you're feeling. So Art reluctantly agrees. He goes home, he gets out a piece of paper, and he begins writing all the details of everything that happened leading up to that day in 1989 and what actually happened on that day in 1989. And when he was done and he had a chance to look at what he had written, he didn't feel better. He felt worse. He felt more guilty. But that's because Art had a secret that the therapist didn't know about. And now that it was out on paper, Art suddenly felt like, you know what, before I die, I have to tell the world what me and my wife did. So in 2019, he...
Did him and his wife take this child's life or something? Is that what happened? Did his wife take the child's life? Is that how it was lost? Oh man, what happened here?
He took all of those notes that he had written down about what had happened. and he posted it to Reddit. This is his confession story.
Lost cause.
Art's son was very, very troubled. Art would say, if you've seen the movie, We Need to Talk About Kevin, where a couple's son turns out to be a total psychopath, Art says that's a pretty good representation of what home life was like with our son. From the day Art's son was born in 1971, it was like something was off about him. Art and his wife Lisa had planned this pregnancy, and they were ecstatic when their baby boy was welcomed to the world, and they showered him with affection and love and did everything they possibly could to give him a warm, loving environment. But no matter what they did, it just seemed like he was always miserable. Their son cried constantly for the first 13 months of his life. Now, Art and Lisa understood that when you bring a baby home, there's a good chance they're going to cry. But his crying was so constant, and he could not be calmed down, that they grew concerned that this was more than just a colicky baby, that there could be some underlying issue.
There probably is. There's probably some issues that are wrong with this kid that nobody knows about, and due to that fact, it's causing them to cry, and it's causing them to have issues.
And so they brought their son to doctors and specialists, and they tried every treatment under the sun. They changed his diet, they changed his room, they sang him songs, they changed everything they could, but it never stopped. And so 13 months of grinding, grating, no sleep time. Finally, in the 14th month of his life, he seemed to get over the incessant crying stage, and Art and Lisa were so relieved. It seemed like finally they could just be loving parents and not be so frustrated with their child all the time. But it seemed like
Oh, so they have this troubled child that just never seems to get better. I feel that's what this is. Because that's the term lost cause, so the child was probably the lost cause.
now that he wasn't crying, he still was just totally unhappy. His body language and everything about him said, I'm not happy. Always. Art said that he never saw his son ever have a genuine, joyous smile. The only time he saw something resembling a smile was when his son would grin after causing someone pain or breaking a rule or in some way being bad. And then once his son started walking, all he wanted to do was just destroy everything in front of him. But again, Art and Lisa, they realized that this is all pretty typical child behavior, albeit maybe on the more extreme end of bad behavior, but it's still in the realm of normal child. And they're thinking that they are the reason this is happening. And so they're not blaming their son at this point. They're still doing everything they can to take...
Well, of course, no one wants to believe their kid is a bad kid. Everyone wants to try to believe their kid is the best kid. That's the thing. No parent immediately knows their kid's a bad kid. They try to come up with some way that their kid's not the bad one. It's until they find out the hard way that makes it bad.
Take care of him and love him to the best of their ability. When their son was about 2 years old, he learned how to take off his diaper, and he began sneaking around the house and emptying the contents of his diaper into corners of the house, underneath carpets, grinding it into the carpet, smearing it on the walls. But again, Art and Lisa are looking inward and saying, our child is only 2 years old. It can't be his fault he's acting this way. It's our fault for not finding a way to correct this behavior. But Art and Lisa started to drift away from that opinion when their son got a little bit older, got potty trained, and wasn't using diapers anymore, and still was going around the house and squatting down and going to the bathroom all over the house, making a mess at every possible chance.
That's just an immature dipshit at this point. Like, this is a kid who just, for some reason, is causing problems for no effing reason. It's just unnecessary.
He could. And not just when he was 4, 5, 6 years old. All the way up until he was 15 years old, he was doing this.
Okay, yeah, this kid's an idiot. This kid's a dumbass. I'm sorry. This kid, once you're 15 and that, and once you're, like, past the age of, like, 8, you know better. So once you're, like, no, once you're, like, 6 or 7, you know better. Like, than to do that. Like, come on. And this kid needs to get some... This kid's just a bad kid. That's it. Bad kid. Dumb bad kid.
And he stopped doing it in random corners, and he began only going into his parents' bedroom every chance he got, opening up the sheets, going inside, going to the bathroom, shutting it back up, and leaving. It got to the point where Art and Lisa literally could not stop their son from doing this. He was absolutely determined to do this. So anytime they were away, he would even sneak in the windows to do this. I mean, he was totally hell-bent on going to the bathroom in their bed. And so they
So weird. He's such a weird kid. This kid needs some help. This kid's weird.
had to start putting locks on the windows and the doors of their bedroom. But when they had finally secured that room to where he really couldn't get in anymore, he began going to the bathroom right outside their door and in the other beds in the house. And so they began investing in locks on all of the doors. They even replaced the doors themselves because they were too flimsy, and they thought there's a good chance he might kick these doors in to try to get them open. So they put these big, thick doors up all through their house and put these big locks with key locks all over the house to keep their son from going in and going to the bathroom all over their bed sheets. As their son grew older, he became more and more unmanageable, well beyond just going to the bathroom in different places. He became violent, and he would bite and kick and scratch and spit on anybody that came near him. He was like a wild animal. Before he was 9 years old, he had been kicked out of school 2 separate times.
What went on with this kid that led him from pretty much the beginning of being born to just be unhappy and grumpy and annoyed, like, and violent? Like, there's no need for it. Why?
When they let him back in a third time, he apparently did something that was so bad that they effectively expelled him. A 9-year-old is getting expelled from school. So they had to enroll him at this other special school that would accept him with his history. But part of the deal with this school is you don't have any interaction with other students. He was considered too dangerous to be around other kids. So he was totally isolated at school, and it ultimately made him a lot worse.
I'm about to say, because you're keeping him away from people so he's not interacting with people. Like, that's... I get why, because he's violent all the time, so you don't want him around people, but still, you have to look at the scenario of he is around people. If he's not around people, he's isolated, so he only has himself on. So that makes him way worse.
Once he was enrolled in this school, he became really violent at home. He would come home from school and he would go right to the kitchen and get a knife out, and he would start threatening his parents to the point where they had to lock all the drawers in the kitchen. Once all of the knives were under lock and key in Art's house, his son began stealing knives from the neighbor's house, smuggling them back into the house, and at night he would pull them out and try to stab Art. And on 2 different occasions, he was successful.
How the hell is this kid's not in jail? This kid's arrested people. This kid trying to stab and kill his, like, father. Like, this old man. Like, I don't think he's an old man at this point. This 30 years ago. So yeah, just trying to kill his father. Like, what the hell?
And Art still has scars on his leg from it. And Art's son was not just attacking his parents. He was also turning on local animals that were helpless. He blinded one of the local dogs that was running around the area by just stabbing it in the eye one day. He went after one of the stray cats and he lit its tail on fire. And honestly, Art doesn't even know the other damages he had done to other animals or even other people. Even though Art and Lisa massively resented their son for how badly he treated them and how difficult he was making their lives, they recognized that this was a child that needed help. And so they tried everything they could to help him.
That's the thing, is they know it's a child that needs some help. They just gotta figure out what the help is, and until they figure that out, he's not changing. That's the thing. That's the sad part of it.
By enrolling him in that special school that ultimately was isolating, but it was an attempt to try to help him, or bringing him to different therapists and psychologists and doctors, putting him on different medications and bringing him to meditation consultants. I mean, you name it, they tried everything they could to try to help this kid, but nothing worked. He only got angrier and got bigger and stronger and more aggressive and violent. And eventually Art and Lisa are like, what do we do about this? What ultimately started happening over the following years is Art and Lisa became prisoners of their own home. That every time their son was around, they felt unsafe around him. He was such a wild card, and he had these crazy angry outbursts, and he was clearly prone to...
Could you imagine being a prisoner in your own home because of your son? Because your son is so violent and unpredictable, and will do whatever because of his angry outbursts, so he can't even be... You can't reason with him or anything. This kid is just... You have to be cautious around your own son because you don't want him to do anything to you. You know how, like, uncomfortably scary that probably must be. Jesus. I don't want to live in that scenario. Nope, not at all.
Extreme violence, and so they began using those heavy doors and locks to lock themselves away from their son. It was the only way they felt safe. And so with that in mind, fast forward to 1988 when Art's son is now 16 years old, and Art and Lisa find out they're pregnant again. It was a surprise, and they were not happy about it. In fact, because of how badly it had gone with their son, they were really scared that another child was going to be just as bad, and they couldn't possibly go through this again. And so they decided that they weren't going to terminate, but if they noticed early on this child was a huge problem child, as horrible as they felt about it, they knew they would give it up for adoption. They simply couldn't do this again. This time they had a daughter, and she was normal. She was nothing like their son. She didn't come home and cry constantly. She smiled and laughed, and after a few months she was sleeping through the night, and she was hitting her milestones, and she just seemed happy, and she was easy. And it was around this time that Art and Lisa began to realize just how bad their son was. Seeing how wonderful their daughter was just amplified all of their son's atrocious behavior over the first 16 years of his life.
Yeah, because they probably ended the assumption that's just how kids are. Maybe this is just how kids actually are. But then once they had the daughter, saw the daughter was normal and was not crying and was sleeping and was doing all that, they're probably just thinking, well, what do we do now? Because this kid the daughter's clearly normal. What the hell is going on with him then? It just kind of amplifies how bad this the son is.
And so Art and Lisa really began to look at their son as more of a lost cause. And they were less invested in going through the motions to try to find some way to help him when they knew it wasn't going to work. It had never worked. And he's only a couple years away from being 18, and he can go out on his own and figure it out for himself. And now, since they didn't really care as much about him, suddenly his behavior was intolerable. And anytime he acted up, they would never lay a hand on him, but they were not afraid to tell him to basically get the F out of here. We are not putting up with this. Leave. And so regularly, Art and Lisa would have these horrific screaming matches with their son until their son would basically run away in a rage and then come back hours later or even a couple days later. And Art said he began to look forward to fighting with his son because every time they fought, it meant his son would be gone for a little while afterwards and there would be a little bit of peace and calm inside the house. But at the same time, Art and Lisa were concerned one of these days he's going to come back in after one of these fights and he's going to kill us. So it went on like this.
That is a concern I can see why they have, knowing the way this kid's acting. I can see why they have that concern.
For about a year until a rainy day in 1989 when their son was almost 18 and their daughter was almost 1 year old. Now the house they lived in was a single-story bungalow and their daughter's room was against a sidewall where there was a window leading to the outside. That morning, Art and Lisa had got into one of the worst screaming matches with their son they'd ever had, and he left in a rage and they slammed and locked the door behind him. After a couple of hours, their son is still gone and they don't expect to see him anytime soon. And their daughter is starting to get fussy. She seems tired. And so they walk into her bedroom, they put her in her crib for a nap. And then Art and Lisa leave her room, shut the door behind them and go sit down in the kitchen. A couple minutes later, they hear their daughter screaming at the top of her lungs. And Art and Lisa immediately recognize this is not an ordinary cry. This sounds like something is terribly wrong. They get up and sprint down the hall to her room and they try the door handle, but it's locked. They run back out to the kitchen, they get the keys, they go back, they're fumbling with the keys, they finally open it up, and there in the back of the room, standing next to the crib, is their son. And he's holding a knife, and he's poking it into her face. And Art said he looked at his daughter, and he could see blood on her stomach and blood on her arm, and she's screaming, and so he thinks to himself, thank God she's still alive. And instinctively, Art starts running to try to put himself between his son and his daughter. But before he could even get there, his wife had moved much faster, and she charged over and smashes her son's hand. The knife falls to the ground. She pushes him as hard as she possibly can, and he goes slamming into the wall and falls on the ground. Art.
Yep, because again, once the son became a lost cause, then he's just a dude. Now you're just a dude to them. Now you're just and when you're just a dude, you're trying to poke their daughter with a knife. hell breaks loose on you, my friend. You're just as sick. You're a pathetic son of a bitch for them. So yeah, what probably, because I have a feeling there's more than just about to happen here. I will see what they do, but I might understand it.
Immediately reaches into the crib, picks his daughter up, and runs to the other side of the room. And he kind of looks her over. She's crying, she's in pain, she's scared, but he can see the cuts on her are superficial. He turns back around and he can see his wife is standing there with her fist balled, standing in front of her son. Her son stands up and he's looking at her, no emotion on his face. Art would even say that it was like he was looking at an alien. This person wasn't human. How could they do this to their own sister, to a baby? And he stared at him, and then he noticed his wife was moving towards her son like she was going to attack him. And this is where Art says he knew he was supposed to go over there and stop whatever was about to happen. But he didn't. And this is the part of the story where Art reveals his wife, she's this amazing boxer, and he knew that she could beat the living crap out of just about anybody. The son is so stunned by how quickly this...
So the wife is a boxer and could pretty much beat everyone. Beat up anybody she wanted to. And he knows, okay, he's supposed to stop what's about to happen of her beating his ass. His son's ass. But because of 18 years, or at least almost 18 years of pain and suffering that this son has caused them, he's not gonna stop it. He's just gonna let it happen. It's wrong. Unfortunately, it's the way it is. It's just the way this guy thought. He thought he don't want to stop it anymore. You could see this both directions. You could see, because it's horrible. Because even after all that, he wants his son to get beaten up for it. But mentally, you can also somewhat understand it because it's pain of him suffering. It's the receipt of him suffering for that long, causing that. So you get it.
Has happened, that he's not doing anything. He's not positioning himself to fight back or to even preemptively attack his mother. He's just kind of standing there looking at his mother with no expression on his face. And that's when Art's wife winds up and blasts him across the face, knocking his head back. And Art said immediately he could tell his nose was broken, blood squirts all over his face, and he falls to the ground. Until this moment, neither Lisa nor Art had ever laid a hand on their son. Even when he stabbed Art twice in the legs, they never physically struck their son. But this was different. Their son had crossed the line and he could never come back. And so even though Art knew if he doesn't step in, his wife is going to beat their son to death, even though he knew that was going to happen, he remembers thinking, good. And he turns around and he leaves the room with his daughter. As Art cleans up his daughter and puts band-aids on each of the cuts that were inflicted on her, he hears in the other room his son is yelling and screaming at their mother, saying, I'm going to kill you. And she is just ruthlessly punching, kicking, and smashing him. It is not slowing down at all. And Art remembers by the time he picked his daughter back up, after putting all her band-aids on and she'd kind of calmed down, he still heard his wife punching, kicking, and smashing their son, who's now unconscious. Again,
damn, so this girl, this wife, who pretty much, I'm going to assume, she might not know this, I'm going to assume the wife blacked out. Because I've had blackout moments where I'm angry. Usually I'm alone, thankfully. I make sure I'm alone so nothing happens. But I've had those moments. And she probably has no memory of what she did. I might be wrong. She might remember clear as day. But I will assume you black out, because when you're consistently thing, you're committing attempted murder here. So I'm going to assume she probably wouldn't want to do that to her son. Maybe I'm wrong though.
Again, Art knows if I don't go in there now, my unconscious son is getting his head kicked in by his mother. If I don't go in there now, he's gonna die. For sure. But Art wants that to happen. So he doesn't go in there. Instead, he just rocks his daughter until she falls asleep. And by the time she's snoring in his arms, his wife is still punching, kicking, and smashing their son, who hasn't made a sound in a long time. Art just sits down at the kitchen table, hoists his daughter onto his shoulder, and just listens for his wife to finish what she's doing. And finally it does go quiet in there, and his wife emerges from the room, and she's covered in blood. Her hands are swollen and red, and her chest is heaving like she's been running a race. She comes into the kitchen and sits down at the table next to Art and looks at him, and he looks back at her, and he just says, "Is he dead?" And she says, "I hope so." And he just goes, "Yeah, me too." Art and Lisa sat at the...
That is insane that they both just hoped that the son died in that. That is insane that they both thought that. They both thought, is the son dead? That's what they wanted to have happen. That's how bad he made them. They wanted him to die. Wow. That is insane.
The kitchen table for a long time. There was no sound coming from the room where their son was. And eventually Lisa starts crying and goes and takes a shower. At which point Art stands up and he goes into the bedroom where his son was, and this is when he can tell his son is actually still alive. He walks in and he can see his son still breathing, but he's covered in blood, he's got vomit on him, he's clearly wet his pants, his teeth have been knocked out, his whole face is bloodied and bruised and swollen, and he goes up to him and he thinks there's no way he's going to live through this. But Art has kind of an internal crisis because he wants him to die. He doesn't want him to live. And so that decision of should I call an ambulance or should I call police was a really difficult one to make because really neither served the purpose that he or his wife wanted. And so as he's standing there wondering what to do, he hears his wife come out of the shower. And so he leaves the room and he confers with his wife, and they decide, we're not going to call the police, we're not going to call an ambulance, we're going to do nothing. And so right then and there, they walked around their house, they gathered up a couple things, and they headed downstairs into the basement where they had an in-law suite, which basically was a little apartment that they didn't really use, but it had everything they needed. And they moved down there and they locked the one door that led down there, and they locked the side door as well. They figured if he lived, there would be enough food to get him through a few weeks upstairs. There's water up there, bedrooms, bathrooms. He had all of that. And at some point he would run out of food and he would have to leave. Or he would die upstairs, and in a couple weeks they would go up and they would deal with it. Over the next week, they began to hear movement upstairs.
That is insane that this is their thought process. They thought he's either going to run out of food after a few weeks and he'll leave, or he'll die up there, and then in a few weeks we'll deal with it. That is insane. What? What? This person is... These parents are freaking nuts, man. What the hell?
Which signaled to them he was alive, but he wasn't moving around much. It was just enough to know somebody was up there. They figured that, okay, he's probably laying down most of the time recovering. And so Art began going back to work. He would go out the side door, and every time he went outside and he was on the driveway, he was expecting his son to come out and attack him, but he never did. And his wife, Lisa, she stayed with their daughter 24/7, stayed in the house, and at no point did the son ever try to come downstairs and try to attack her or them at any point. Probably because he was afraid of his mother. About 3 weeks after the attack, they were in bed in the basement and they heard him going absolutely ballistic upstairs, screaming, punching walls, breaking things, and they decided, you know what, whatever he does up there, it's not worth going up there and confronting him. Let him do whatever he wants. And then the next day, it was totally quiet. And for the next couple of days, Art and Lisa would listen really intently to see if they could hear him moving around upstairs, but they couldn't. And so finally, Art and Lisa decide to go up into the main floor and see if he's up there. When they open the door, they find their entire upstairs has been absolutely wrecked. Every piece of furniture is ruined, every window's broken, there's glass all over the place, there's brown smears all over the walls. But their son isn't there. And so they figured that night when they heard him going crazy upstairs, he already knew he was going to leave. He just wanted to ruin their house before he did. Even though their son was gone, they had no idea if he was going to come back or not. And so for days and weeks and months, they lived in fear that their son was just going to show up one day and kill them. But he never did. And then 3 years after the incident, they moved and they weren't in contact with their son. They hadn't seen him. And so he had no idea where they were going and they have no way to contact him. So that was it. They just restarted somewhere else. Fast forward to 2019 when Art is making this Reddit post and he says, I haven't seen my son since 1989 and I don't want to see him again. And Art goes on to say that while he hopes his son was able to overcome his demons and live a normal life, he said if he wasn't able to do that, if he was out there still causing pain and misery to other people, Art says he hopes that whoever was on the receiving end of that finished the job and killed him. So that's going to do it, guys. I hope.
Wow. What a bad statement to make towards your son. You still hope somebody kills him if he's still the way he was before. Wow. That is insanity. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this reaction video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment what you think down below. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all for the next one.